Skyrim, the game that refuses to die, is still surprising players with the amount of choices it has on offer. If you've been playing Skyrim for longer than most of Fortnite's fanbase has been alive, then you might think that you already know all there is to know about this 13-year-old game. Nevertheless, here are 10 things that you probably didn't know you could do in Skyrim. Number 1. Adopt an adult. Adoption is one of the most useless additions to Skyrim. The children are more or less accessories to the player's headcanon, and raising them in Skyrim is almost as costly as it is in real life. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't immersive or entertaining to have children bringing home pets and getting into some good old sibling rivalry. The biggest problem with this mechanic is its scope, which is non-existent. All the adoptable children in the game are just that. Children. So, if you're trying to roleplay as a more mature Dragonborn, adopting anyone is going to break your immersion faster than incorrectly positioned toilet paper. But contrary to popular belief, you can adopt one adult in Skyrim. Sort of. While there are definitely no adults waiting around to be adopted at Honor Hall, there is the Scorched Hammer just down the street. Here you'll find Balamund, a blacksmith who becomes a candidate for marriage after you get enough fire salt to temper his forge. A not-so-well-known detail about Balamund is that he has a stepson, Asbjorn, whom he adopted from Honor Hall some years back. If you decide to marry the old blacksmith, then Asbjorn will technically be your stepson. While he obviously doesn't ask for toys or throw hissy fits at his siblings, he will occasionally visit whichever house you decide to move into with your new spouse. Number 2. Get permanent magic resistance. Despite the magic system being dumbed down, Skyrim has no shortage of mages, necromancers, and all sorts of creatures whose weapon of choice is harvesting the elements. It's for this reason that magic resistance is one of the most important stats to fill up. But that's easier said than done, especially in the early game. Most players will instead choose to get a follower as soon as possible to let them tank all the damage for them. However, there is a hidden quest that provides one of the best rewards in the game. Simply head down to the Temple of Mara and Riften and speak with Dinya Balu. From there, you'll start the Book of Love, a quest that turns you into a glorified relationship advisor that goes around Skyrim solving the relationship issues of its citizens. Upon completing the quest, you'll be bestowed Mara's Blessing, a permanent effect that gives you 15% resistance to magic, as well as a free amulet of Mara to help you find the spouse of your dreams. Number 3. Get a secret blessing. Skyrim is chock full of permanent effects that nobody's ever heard of, but none have been hiding under the nose of Skyrim players quite as much as Voice of the Sky. Extremely useful for survival mode, this blessing makes it so that animals will neither attack nor flee from you for a whole day. As convenient as this blessing is, attaining it is a little less so. To do so, you must go back to the throat of the world and climb the 7,000 steps. On your way up, you'll find 10 etched tablets that tell the history of men, dragons, and the voice. After reading all 10 tablets, you'll gain the blessing Voice of the Sky. While preventing animals from attacking or fleeing from you is all well and good, this blessing becomes doubly useful when you realize it works on vampires too. So, enjoy the Dawnguard expansion being a breeze, at least for a single day. Number 4. Unrelenting Force Tricks. Unrelenting Force is the first and most iconic shout in the game, so you'd expect that most players would know how to use this shout in and out, right? It turns out that Skyrim players are nowhere near as interesting in depth as they claim to be, as most players think the most useful thing this shout can do is send enemies flying off cliff faces. And as entertaining as that is, it's merely the tip of the iceberg for the use of this shout. For example, instead of waiting for Draugr tombs to be opened by a gameplay trigger, you can just shout at them to manually open them yourself. You can also easily activate runes and traps from a safe distance with a shout, and you can even immediately kill fish and insects in masses without having to worry about aiming. And they say shouting at your problems doesn't solve anything. Number 5. Remove full damage. Full damage has been applied on Skyrim since its inception. Calm down, I'm not talking about the channel. For a game with as much verticality as Skyrim, it's a shame that the only means of scaling down its mountainous terrain is by either painstakingly going back the way you came, fast traveling, or hoping that the 9 divines will show you mercy and make a leap of faith. But the first 2 options are pretty boring, and the only place the latter option will take you is to your last save file. That being said, there is a way to get down that's as effective as it is hilarious. One of the rarest resources in the game is a substance called Netch Jelly. It can only be found harvested from the Netches in Solstheim, with a few samples being found scattered around the environment. But this rarity makes sense, as it's the only ingredient in the game that has paralysis as its primary effect. This means that there's no need to combine any ingredients together or learn recipes to make your character as stiff as one of your mannequins. While paralyzing yourself may seem counterintuitive, a hidden attribute of the effect is that it makes the player immune to fall damage for a few seconds. Now, the only thing you need to scale down a mountain is to slap some of this gooey jelly just before you hit the ground and watch as your character bounces off the ground like a basketball, completely unharmed. Number 6. Recruit a Thieves Guild member. It seems that Bethesda spent their entire immersive sim budget on diplomatic immunity, because that quest has more choices and variables than virtually all other quests combined. There's no better example of this than the case of Etienne Ranis. This person can be found at the tail end of the quest, bound, beaten, and interrogated by the Thalmor. But if you're fast enough, you can then take down the Thalmor torturers and put an end to Etienne's misery. From there, you've taken the choice of simply freeing him or pretending to be another torturer trying to get more information out of him. Regardless of what choice you make, if Etienne manages to escape the embassy, then he can later be found at the Ragged Flagon. It turns out he was a Thieves Guild member this whole time, which is strange considering he was nowhere to be seen before this quest. Nevertheless, if you go and talk to him now, you'll get unique dialogue depending on how you treated him. If you were helpful from the beginning, then he'll open up by being grateful for what you did. But if you were a little more tyrannical in your treatment of him, then he'll be considerably less friendly. Number 7. Get a free horse. If there's one quest reward that Bethesda gives out like Tic Tacs, it's horses. Case in point, Frost. While this horse may not look as cool as Shadowmere or be as convenient as Arvak, he's a lot easier to obtain than either of those creatures. Inside the Bee and Barb, you'll find a Breton known as Louis Latruche. Sometime before the start of the game, Latruche purchased a horse from Sibby Blackbriar and was waiting to receive its lineage papers. But before he could get a hold of these papers, Sibby was imprisoned for murder. Things only get more complicated when you talk to Sibby in the Riften jail, where he reveals that the horse is actually entitled to the Blackbriar estates, meaning that his true owner is Maven Blackbriar herself. And so, Sibby suggests you steal the horse and deliver it to Latruche. Obviously, it might be a bad move to slight one of the most powerful people in Skyrim. Even going to the Thieves Guild for help in the matter will make them tell you to look the other way. But who says you have to cross Maven at all? Instead of listening to the orders of a horse thief and a murderer, you can just go to Maven directly and tell her about the plot to steal Frost. From there, she'll tell you to continue on with the plot as usual, insinuating that she will strike when the time is right. That time turns out to be at the end of the quest. After stealing Frost and bringing him back to Latruche, he'll reward you with a sum of gold before being promptly executed by a Blackbriar mercenary. Best of all is that you get to keep Frost, along with the gold that Latruche gave you. Talk about swift justice. Number 8. Talk about your past. Among all of Skyrim's many mysteries, few are as elusive as the Dragonborn themselves. Despite spending more time with them than any other character, we seem to know the least about them. However, there are a few pieces of hidden dialogue that allow you to flesh out your character's past. A more obvious time this happens is during the Forsworn Conspiracy questline. You'll eventually be captured by Markarth's corrupt guards and sent to the Sidna Mines. There you must speak with Braig, who asks you about your family. Here, you have the choice of mentioning that you have family outside of Skyrim, or that you have none you care to talk about. A more hidden time this happens is with Serana. She knows a thing or two about dysfunctional families, so it makes sense that her 2 cents on such matters might be a little more valuable than the average person. During your travels with her, you can ask about her family. This will open a long-winded dialogue where the two of you exchange details about your families. From there, you can talk about your relationship with your family, whether your character feels lonely at times, and even your relationship status. It seems that Bethesda was trying to build something between the Dragonborn and Serana that never came to be, which is just about the most distressing thing I've learned all day. Number 9. Save skill books. Unlike most RPGs that level the player up by completing more of the game, Skyrim takes the RuneScape approach and makes it so that investing time into your talents is the aim of the game. However, a lot of people have grown to hate this method of leveling up because apparently spamming a spell for 20 minutes isn't all that fun. But there is only one problem. Skill books level the player's skills upon reading them. Since you're forced to read a book when you pick it up, you're going to have most skill books read before the endgame even starts. Which sucks, since leveling up any skill beyond 80 takes longer than it's taking Bethesda to fix Starfield. Luckily, there's a neat little trick that many players aren't aware of. While you're forced to read skill books if they're picked up from the world, the same is not true when they're going from container to container. This means that if you bring a follower along and command them to pick up the books, they'll be stored in the follower's inventory, with their skill increase yet to be used. From there, all you have to do is transfer them into a safe storage area, play the game as you would, and come back to them once leveling up your skills takes too long. And finally, number 10. Find GLaDOS. I'm sure you already know about the notched pickaxe at the top of the throat of the world and the Pac-Man cheese wheel inside Endon's house in Markarth. But there's another video game reference that few players have discovered on their own, and I wouldn't blame them, as it's one of the most well-hidden Easter eggs in the game. It can be found in Skuldafn, inside the final interior cell, before you go to the portal to Sovngarde. Within an unassuming room, you can find a boring old fireplace, but keen-eyed players will notice that something seems to be behind it. Upon closer inspection, it becomes obvious that this is none other than GLaDOS from Portal 2, albeit in her embarrassed potato form. And while it may seem funny to most players at first glance, I'd be lying if I didn't say it was a little ominous to see one of the most clinically evil villains silently hiding behind a fireplace, especially considering the Portal and Skyrim tie-in mod that Valve officially released on the workshop.
Subscribe to Fall Damage, you milk drinker.